Okay, so I'm going to start off with something really simple just so that we can kind of understand it. So if you have the square root of x equals 5, then you're saying the square root of what will give me 5? Well, we know that that's 25. But now let's see how we get that. So the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So we have to square both sides. And if I square a square root, that just gets rid of it, and now it's just x equals, and then 5 squared is 25. So you just have to square both sides, because if you square one side, you have to square the other. Okay, so now, here, you'll want to, if there's only one square root, you'll want to get it on its own side. So I always get one square root on one side, and if there's another one, I usually will put it on the other one. But in this case, there's only one square root, so I get that alone. So there's nothing else on this side, so then I can square both sides. So then I just have 4x minus 3 equals 7 squared, which is 49. And then I can just solve it. So I'd add 3, which would be what, 52, and then divide by 4, and that would give me 13. And that's our answer. Okay, so on this one, square root on both sides, so I just have to square both sides. And then that just gets rid of the square and square root. So you just have 3x plus 2 equals 9x minus 10. So I'm going to move. I always am in the habit of moving my x's to the left side just because my students understand that more. So I'd minus 9x, and then minus 2 onto this side. So then I'd have negative 6x equals negative 12 divided by negative 6, so x equals 2. Okay, and now for these, you have to check for extraneous solutions whenever there's more than one x once you're squaring. But really, you should check on all of them. An extraneous solution means that you get the answer, but when you plug it back in, it doesn't work. So I'm going to plug it back in. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. So we get square root of 8. Okay, let's check in on this side. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 minus 10 is square root of 8. So I got the same thing on the left and the right. So yeah, we did that right. So I always make my students go back and check their answers on these. But I don't know if your teacher is making you. Okay, the next one is number 11. So first, they just make it look more confusing, but it's not a big deal. You just have to multiply the x through. So we'll have 2x squared plus 5x equals 5. Okay, so I have a square root and then equals 5. So the square root is alone. So then I can just square both sides. So then that takes off the square root. Now just so you know, that square is right there to all of that, not to the x. Equals, okay, and then 5 squared is 25. Okay, now here, we'll need to move everything onto one side. Now you'll know you'll have to move everything onto one side when you have an x squared. When you have an x squared, you have to move everything onto one side and then factor or do quadratic formula to solve it. Or you could complete the square, but completing the square is no fun. So I always tell my students not to. So we have 2x squared plus 5x, okay, and then minus 25. So I'm going to try factoring this. So 2 times 25, negative 25, is negative 50. Two numbers that multiply to get negative 50 and add up to get 5. That's going to be 10 and 5. And I just have to figure out which one's going to be negative, so that's positive, so then that negative 5. So then I'm going to have 2x plus 10, 2x minus 5. Now remember, that is a 2x squared, so the 2x goes here and there. Okay, and then this can reduce. 2 can be divided out of both of those. And it wasn't a GCF. There was no GCF at the beginning, so it doesn't come outside. So we'll just have x plus 5 and 2x minus 5 cannot be reduced. So then we have to see, okay, well then, if this equals 0, then we have to set each of those equal to 0. Okay, and then I'm going to minus 5, so x equals negative 5. Or add 5, I'm running out of room, whoops, equals 5. Divide by 2, so x equals 5 halves. And we need to check both of our answers. So I'm just going to check one of them because I can look at this and know that it's going to work. So negative 5 is easy to plug in, but let me help you with this one. So if I have square root of 5 halves times 2 times 5 halves plus 5, then 2 and 2, that gets rid of each other. 5 plus 5 is 10. So the square root of 5 halves times 10, that's going to give me 50 divided by 2, which is square root of 25, which is 5. So yep, that worked. And just trust me, this one worked too. Okay, just for sake of time. Okay, now for this one, the square root is all alone. So then I'm just going to square both sides, but notice if you square this side, you have to put parentheses around it because that means x plus 4 times x plus 4. This is square root of x plus, oh, not square root anymore, just x plus 6, sorry. Okay, I'm going to FOIL this, so we're going to get x squared, and then we have a 4x plus 4x, that's 8x. 4 times 4 is 16. That's x plus 6. Okay, now, remember when we were over here? When you have an x squared, you get everything onto one side. Now, I forgot to say something. You always get it onto the side where x squared is positive. So see how it's positive 2x squared? If it would have been negative, we would have moved everything over to that side. But since that is positive, we move everything onto that side because it's too hard to factor when it's a negative, because then you have to divide by a negative and then go on. So it's just easier if you make x squared a positive. So over here, this x squared that we have is positive, so I'm going to move these onto that side. So I'm going to have to minus an x. Now I'm going to minus an x from 8x, because those are like terms. And then minus the 6, so I'm going to minus it from 16, because those are like terms. So then we're going to have x squared minus 7x plus 10. So now we have to find two numbers that multiply to get 10 and add up to get negative 7. So it's going to be negative 5 and negative 2. So we're going to have x minus 5, x minus 2. Now it says that it's set equal to 0, so I have to set both of them equal to 0. So x minus 5 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to add 5, x equals 5, and x equals 2. Now this is when it's important to check for extraneous solutions, meaning that when you plug it back in, it doesn't work. The reason being is because there's an x on both sides. When there's an x on both sides, sometimes they don't work. Okay, so these are our answers, and let's plug it back in and check. So 5 plus 6 is 11. So we get the square root of 11 over here. And then 5 plus 4 is 9. So is square root of 11 equal to 9? No, so then that one's an extraneous solution. It didn't work. Okay, and then this one, 2 plus 6 is 8, so square root of 8. And then 2 plus 4 is 6. So is the square root of 8 equal to 6? Nope, didn't work. So they're both extraneous solutions. You have to plug your answers into the very original, so like what is written in your book, just so you know. So when you plug answers back in, you always check from the very original. Okay, let's do one more on this one. Whoops. Oh, my camera might fall. Okay. This one's going to be the last one on this video. So we have the square root here, so then we need to move everything else onto the other side. So I'm going to minus 5x and add 13. Minus 5x plus 13. Okay, and then we can square both sides. So we have negative 5x plus 13. Negative 5x plus 13. And that's just x plus 7. So then we would FOIL this. This is going to get really big. So positive 25x squared. That's going to give me negative 65x, negative 65x, and I just went mind blank on that. What's 13 times 13, Trent? 169, right?
Huh?
Is it 169? No.
160. Oh, sorry, yeah. 13 times 13?
Yeah.
130, and then 3 times 13 is 39, yeah.
169. Okay. And then that's going to make that negative 130x plus 169, 25x squared. Now for this one, I probably wouldn't factor it. I would probably just go ahead and do quadratic formula. So you can do that on that one and then go back and plug in your answers and check. Alright, I'll make one more video for the last, like, I think 4 questions.